Hi everyone, and welcome back to Nasedyanka, the channel where I talk about Bulgarian history, culture, tradition and faith. Well, this is supposed to be part 2 of the recent video that I made about the Zmийski city in Bulgaria, which is super ancient. It has been evaluated to go back at least back to 8000 BC, but probably 20,000 years ago wouldn't be an exaggeration. I am somewhere in a very cool place. There is a waterfall out here. I wanted to make this video by the waterfall, but clearly if it's loud enough here, you guys would not be able to hear well at all if I got closer to the waterfall. So I'm still going to hunt for a different place and try to make this work. Bear with me. How about here? I even hear an airplane above my head. That is so loud. How about here? Like, it looks like it's getting only louder and louder and prettier and prettier. Look, I've been climbing some tree branches and rocks. It's really beautiful. It's gorgeous. But I don't think I can talk here yet. The water is louder than I am. I think I just found kestini. I don't even know what you guys call that in English. Chestnuts? Yeah, I think that's a chestnut in English. I haven't seen those since I've lived in Bulgaria. Wow, this path is full of them. I'm seeing the shells and I'm going to look for the nuts around here. So beautiful. It's a big tree. Oh wow, it is a tall tree. It's so gorgeous here. Well, hi again. So this whole day went crazy. It was unplanned. It was as spontaneous goes. So here I am. I'm back home. I actually ended up recording the second part out there at the park with the waterfalls. But my voice got so muffled when I listened to it afterwards. I realized that it was really hard to hear. So long story short, here I am. I traveled all the way back home and I am going to do a second recording of this. By the way, recording a second time for me feels so bad because I really hate rehearsals. Makes me think of a rehearsal. I'm not a rehearsal kind of a person. I love spontaneity. I love just, having an idea, sharing it. I go for it. I'm an artist. I'm creative. That's how I am. Having to rehearse makes my head want to hurt. It's like, oh my God, I have to be making it, I don't know, perfect, or there have to be some kind of expectations. But it actually reminds me, which is a good thing. I mean, I appreciate it at least. It reminds me of the way in which I grew up as a child, born in Bulgaria, and I went to school there. So our teachers back in the day used to expect remembering material. So lessons for our school material had to be remembered, at least memorized by, I don't know, the majority, most of the part. We had to really grasp the material. But say poetry, We had to memorize poetry word for word, and then we had to recite it standing in front of the class and, swallow our pride, humble ourselves, practice real vulnerability, and recite. And it wasn't only in the schools, it was also our families. Like, I remember my family celebrating Christmas, for example, and somebody had dressed up like Santa Claus, and I wouldn't get my gift. I was expected to say a poem or sing a song in front of everybody so they could clap, and I could get my gifts from Santa. So the good part of this is that it actually really trains the memory. So when I actually moved abroad and I came to live in the West, I went to high school, and I remember it must have been in my first or second year. I still didn't speak English. I had no idea what people were talking about in English. The only thing I could say when I came here was probably like, what's the homework for tomorrow or for next week? And definitely I was able to say I don't speak English. That's all I knew. So I had no capacity of conversing, making like any kind of conversation like that. But I took a public speaking class. On top of that, I passed it with an A. I still think that's like the most ironic story possible to tell. True thing, guys, true thing. I passed it with an A, and what helped me was I would memorize the material. I remember it was a public speaking class. I had to write essays. Now, how grammatically correct they were, I cannot really state, because I used to write them in Bulgarian language, then translate them, and unlike nowadays where we're using Google Translate and we just with one click we're there, we know what the other language is trying to tell us. Back in the day, I was using paper dictionaries, so I had to go word for word, page after page to look for the correct translation. So I used to put a lot of work into languages, and they're my passion nonetheless. I really, really thrived on that. But long story short, I remember memorizing like my whole essay and going in front of the class, reciting it, and then everybody clapped, and then they had questions. I was like clueless what they wanted from me, what they were asking about my paper. But, the teachers were pretty understanding. Obviously, I was just a foreigner for my first time here, in abroad. So rehearsing is not my favorite thing nowadays. I don't like rehearsing. I don't want to be put in a box and just repeat. I don't want to be kind of like, what's the word in English? I don't want to be held down by some kind of a perfectionistic idea. I just want to be free and just go with it. But the recording for part 2 didn't go well. That's all I can tell you. So for this video, I am keeping the parts from my journey out there in the woods so that you guys can see I did make a few attempts at recording. And you can see the waterfall. It was beautiful. The waterfalls, there were little waterfalls, and there was a bigger waterfall. It was just pleasant, gorgeous day anyway, and being in the woods, it's always just beautiful. It is God's creation. So I'll have to record this second time. So bear with me. Okay, so where were we? Oh man. The question that I discussed in part 2, this part, concerned the snake city of Bulgaria, which again dates back to 8000 BC, and some researchers even claim that it is 20,000 years old. So the question here was, why did the ancient figures or figurines depict exactly serpents? So the city is called the snake city because the structure of the stairs kind of goes in a spiral kind of a way. And then again, figures inside are basically again depicting the shapes, the figures of serpents. So scientists, or I should say researchers, draw analogies here with the Eastern practices, such as the culture from India, being one of the oldest civilizations in in the world, where the snake represents a basic mythical figure of worship. They also have drawn analogies with China's dragons, but the ultimate truth is that nobody knows for sure whether those reptilian figures are actually the same reptilian figures that occultists and people nowadays who are interested in esotericism describe. So this is important. In other words, it would not be fair nor correct to draw potentially false conclusions based on assumptions. So we cannot assume that the ancient people that lived on our Bulgarian lands worshipped the snake. This would be false assumption, right? An assumption means that we're thinking something that's not based in facts. Going back to the point here, some scientists speculate that the ancient population in our Bulgarian lands took those symbols from the Far East. Other scientists suggest that the other way around actually is also possible. In other words, that the ancient civilizations such as India, China, but also Egypt, and also the American Incas, for example, borrowed those symbols from the Bulgarian ancestors, like the Proto-Bulgarians, the ancient Bulgarians. For more digging into this kind of information, do feel free to refer to my earlier episodes or like videos where I talked about the ancient Bulgarians in the Americas. So, for what I have read, and yes, I do use my cheat sheet where I can write my stories, my translated stories. Let's see. So for what I have read, it is worth noting that we cannot be certain even that our Bulgarian ancestors literally worshipped those figures. So there exist many other sources of information which quite unsurprisingly clearly point to our distant Bulgarian ancestors' richly advanced civilization, which has left remarkable impressions on the major ancient civilizations that we are familiar with nowadays, that again, like around the world, like India, China, and the Native Americans and so forth. In addition to this, those receivers of the advanced knowledge and practices literally regarded the ancient Bulgarians as gods. And I say that in quotation marks, little g. Those other cultures at the time were basically, how can I say, I mean, they were primitive. Like this, we're speaking about thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. So they didn't have knowledge of mathematics. They didn't know geometry. They didn't know medicine. They didn't know strategizing, let alone word strategizing, architecture, astrology. So there is that also, theory that they learned it from the ancient Bulgarians. And since there are recordings from around the world where that point to those other cultures referring to the ancient Bulgarians as gods, it kind of like makes sense to deduce that they could also have, how can I say, created assumptions. They could have drawn their own assumptions based on symbols that they have seen in those ancient Bulgarians. They could have seen, images that remind them of snakes, and then they could have made some kind of worship related to that, which doesn't mean that the ancient Bulgarians worshipped to begin with. Here is a time where I think it's appropriate to remind you guys, if you have watched my episodes of the ancient Bulgarian calendar, which happens to be even more accurate than the modern day Western calendar that we are following. It is, for instance, the most accurate calendar in the world, and this is not just my saying, but UNESCO has recognized it as such. So that tells us tons. As a matter of fact, again, there is so much I want to post in videos for the future, but somewhere I had seen, and I cannot quote it right now, right away, but again, in the future when I add it into videos, I'll inform you of this. I had listened to an interview where they actually discussed something to the point where the Proto-Bulgarian ancient calendar is so accurate that instead of it having a leap year, like our modern calendar does, its leap or a mistake is one day occurring every 1,000 years. That's phenomenal. That really talks about some high kind of intelligence, again, advanced intelligence. So if those cultures regarded the ancient Bulgarians as gods, ultimately it's very quite likely that they could have regarded anything associated or worn or practiced by the Bulgarians, as a form of worship as well. It doesn't describe our ancient people necessarily, that they should have, would have worshipped it. Professor Raduncheva, and I'm pulling this again from the interview that I'm translating for you guys, and I've put the link for that interview in the comment section under resources. This is what I typically do. So anyway, Professor Raduncheva has referred to the Rodopi Mountains as the ideal destination for such man-made formations. Indeed, like they say, at Bulgarian Rodopi Mountains are filled with such kind of like products. Take, for example, Perpericon, which I spoke about in a recent video. Also Tatul, I haven't developed a video yet about it, but it's another phenomenal place in Bulgaria. Belintash is one of those, and it's just the country is abundant in that. So again, just see my previous video for Perpericon in particular. But researchers have tested, for instance, the magnetic field of those phenomenal places in Bulgaria. So they have found out that, namely, the magnetic fields have kind of like in those places behave quite abnormally, unnaturally, I should say. It is exceptionally like undisturbed in those locations. Perhaps our ancestors were probably like able to depict or sense those magnetic fields, so hence they chose to build their structures, and maybe that was a place for them to receive calm energy, or a place to worship, or a place to practice rituals, who knows. But then again, on the other hand, I'm thinking, could it be possible that the other way around might have happened as well? Like if they built those structures in a way that actually enhances and influences the magnetic field. I don't know. Researchers speculate that the bare type of our Rodopi Mountains, the base of them are like so situated that they do not predispose to anomalies. In other words, the mountain's chemical structure and minerals constitute kind of so constituted so that they don't get magnetized easily. Like the structure of the mountains is such chemically and minerally that they don't predispose the mountains to absorbing like other kind of energy fields or like getting magnetized easily. So in kind of like likewise, the ancient Bulgarians knew this scientific fact. So here I did a side note on my own because I wanted to mention that as a trauma practitioner, I am familiar with the functions of the human nervous system. And in recent years, there has been more and more research, more and more books that have popularized the information about the so-called polyvagal theory, as well as the vagus nerve. Feel free to research this on your own. Basically, what I know, from my professional kind of field is that stimulating the vagus nerve allows human beings to feel more calm, cool, collected, connected, and it is a method of processing trauma. It also allows people to focus, concentrate better. So, is it possible that our ancestors knew this piece of information? Is it possible that they sensed those fields and hence like benefited, from the feelings that they received there? Why not? So this was in a nutshell the information that I failed to produce in a good enough auditory manner back at the waterfalls. Anyways, I'm going to wrap up here. I'll let you enjoy the rest of the video sites. And the third and last part that I have already prepared for you guys and I'll be posting soon refers to the question what or who was that ancient civilization, and also it kind of like addresses, where, why, when, and how did that ancient civilization come from at all. So yeah, stay tuned. Thank you again for your patience and thank you for your encouraging words. That means so much. It's really amazing how small the world feels. Like we say in Bulgaria, the world looks small. It's a small world when people connect around, and it is, when people can kind of share humanity and encouragement and kindness. I should also say that wearing Bulgarian folk clothes out there has been a wonderful experience as well. On the one hand, it is just me, because clearly I love my culture, I love my roots, and I am Bulgarian and I was born in Bulgaria. I also have the passion of making Bulgarian clothes on my own and learning how to do that. I'm not a professional in that, but I teach myself. But also, it's been a way to connect me with so many other strangers, people. So as I was walking today, through the park or through the woods, there were people out there. It was populated, visitors, tourists. So people would stop me and make kind and sweet comments or questions. They would try to guess where I'm from, and it's just a great conversation starter and a way to share our humanness, to share some kindness, to share some or a few smiles, and to be connected in that way, in a human way, in a kind way. So thank you so much. I hope that this finds you well. I hope that you have a great rest of the day wherever you are, and I will present to you shortly part 3, the last part from this series on the snake city of Bulgaria and the Rodopite mountains. Thank you so much. Bye bye.